The sun hung high over Riverside Park on that warm Saturday afternoon in June. 12-year-old Marcus Thompson sat on a bench near the basketball courts, his headphones around his neck, watching a group of teenagers play pickup ball. He'd been waiting for his best friend Tyler to show up for almost 30 minutes, checking his phone every few minutes. Marcus was a quiet kid, thoughtful, polite, the kind of boy who always said yes, sir and no, ma'am without being prompted. His mother, Angela, had raised him that way. His father, James Thompson, had reinforced those values throughout his childhood, even during the years when his police career kept him working long hours. Today was supposed to be simple: basketball with Tyler, maybe grab some ice cream afterward. Marcus had his basketball tucked under the bench, his water bottle beside him. He was minding his own business, scrolling through his phone, when he heard the voice. "Hey. You." Marcus looked up to see a white police officer walking toward him with purposeful strides. The officer was in his late 40s, with a thick neck, a crew cut, and a nameplate that read Officer Brennan. His face was already red, twisted with irritation. "Me?" Marcus asked, pointing at himself. "Yeah, you. What are you doing here?" Marcus blinked, confused. "I'm waiting for my friend." "We're gonna play basketball." "Waiting for your friend," Brennan repeated mockingly. "I've been watching you for 10 minutes. You've been casing these cars in the parking lot." "What?" "No, I haven't." Marcus stood up, his heart beginning to race. "I've just been sitting here." "Don't lie to me, boy." Brennan stepped closer, invading Marcus's space. "I know your type. Saw you looking at that red SUV over there." "I wasn't looking at any cars. I was on my phone." A small crowd began to gather, parents with their children, teenagers from the basketball court, joggers who'd stopped to watch. Everyone seemed to sense that something was wrong. "Show me what's in your pockets," Brennan demanded. "Why?" "I didn't do anything." "I said show me what's in your pockets, now." Brennan's hand moved to his belt, resting near his handcuffs. Marcus felt his hands shaking. His father had taught him how to handle interactions with police: stay calm, be respectful, comply with reasonable requests. But this didn't feel right. He hadn't done anything wrong. "Sir, I have my phone, my wallet, and my house keys," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his fear. "But I don't understand why. Are you resisting?" Brennan cut him off, his voice rising. "No, I'm just asking." The slap came out of nowhere. Brennan's open palm struck Marcus across the face with enough force to snap his head to the side. The crack echoed across the park like a gunshot. Marcus stumbled backward, his hand flying to his burning cheek, his eyes wide with shock and pain. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Hey!" Several people pulled out their phones and began recording. "You don't talk back to me," Brennan yelled, grabbing Marcus by the arm and yanking him forward. "You're coming with me." Marcus's vision blurred with tears, not just from the pain, but from the humiliation, the injustice, the sheer disbelief of what was happening. He hadn't done anything. He was just waiting for his friend. "Let go of me." Marcus tried to pull away, but Brennan's grip tightened, his fingers digging into the boy's arm. "Resisting arrest too? You just keep making it worse for yourself, kid. I'm 12. I didn't do anything." Marcus's voice cracked. A black woman from the crowd stepped forward, her phone held high. "Officer, he's just a child. He was sitting on that bench for 20 minutes before you even showed up. I saw him. He wasn't doing anything wrong." "Ma'am, step back or I'll arrest you for interference," Brennan snapped without looking at her. "Someone call his parents," another person shouted. As Brennan dragged Marcus toward his patrol car, the boy managed to gasp out, "My dad, call my dad." James Thompson. One of the teenagers quickly Googled the name on his phone. His eyes widened. "Yo. James Thompson? That's the new police chief. He just started like 3 days ago." The crowd murmured. Several people immediately began calling the police station, while others continued filming. Meanwhile, at the police station across town, James Thompson sat in his new office on the 3rd floor. The nameplate on his desk still looked surreal to him: Chief James Thompson. After 25 years on the force, working his way up from beat cop to detective to captain, he'd finally achieved his dream position. He'd been officially sworn in just 72 hours ago, and he was still learning the names of all the officers under his command. His secretary, Margaret, knocked on the door. "Chief Thompson, you have multiple calls coming in. They say it's urgent, something about your son at Riverside Park." James's blood went cold. He grabbed his phone and saw 3 missed calls from Angela. He immediately called her back. "James." Angela's voice was panicked. "Marcus is at Riverside Park and someone just called me. A police officer is harassing him." They said the officer hit him. James was already on his feet, grabbing his jacket. I'm on my way. Call Marcus's phone. I tried. He's not answering. James ran through the station, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Officers stopped and stared as their new chief sprinted past them, his face carved from stone, his eyes blazing. He reached his car and peeled out of the parking lot, siren wailing, lights flashing. Riverside Park was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity. By the time James arrived at the park, Marcus was sitting in the back of Brennan's patrol car, tears streaming down his face, his cheek visibly red and swollen. Brennan stood outside the car, arguing with several citizens who were demanding he release the boy. James pulled up fast, his unmarked chief's vehicle stopping abruptly behind Brennan's patrol car. He stepped out, and several people in the crowd immediately pointed at him. That's his father. That's the new police chief. Brennan turned, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He recognized James from the department meeting 3 days ago, the new chief who'd given a speech about community policing and accountability. James walked toward the patrol car with measured steps, his badge clearly visible on his belt. Every eye in the park was on him. Officer Brennan, James said, his voice dangerously quiet. Release my son from that vehicle. Now. Brennan's face went pale. Chief Thompson, I didn't know, I said now. Brennan fumbled with his keys and opened the back door. Marcus stumbled out, and James immediately pulled him into his arms. The boy broke down, sobbing into his father's chest. Dad, I didn't do anything. I was just sitting there. I swear. I know, son. I know. James held him tight, feeling the tremor in his son's body, seeing the red welt on his cheek that was already beginning to bruise. Rage like he'd never known surged through him, but he kept his voice steady. You're safe now. He looked over Marcus's head at Brennan, and the officer actually took a step back at the expression on the chief's face. Multiple witnesses, a woman in the crowd called out. We all saw it. We have videos. That officer assaulted your son for no reason. James gently guided Marcus to sit on a nearby bench, then turned to face Brennan fully. Chief, if I'd known he was your son, Brennan started. Stop right there, James interrupted, his voice cutting like a knife. If you'd known he was my son? So it would have been acceptable to treat him that way if he was someone else's son? Brennan's mouth opened and closed. Let me tell you what I saw in the 3 minutes I've been here, James continued, stepping closer. I saw my 12-year-old son with a handprint on his face. I saw him in tears in the back of your patrol car. I saw at least 20 witnesses with their phones out. And I heard you say, if I'd known he was your son, as if that matters. Sir, what was his crime, Officer Brennan? I thought he was suspicious. He was casing vehicles in the parking lot. He was sitting on a bench. James's voice rose slightly. Multiple witnesses confirm he was sitting on a bench waiting for a friend. With a basketball. At a basketball court. What about that was suspicious? Brennan had no answer. Did you identify yourself properly? Did you have reasonable suspicion? Did you follow any protocol whatsoever before you put your hands on a child? James stepped even closer. And did you really strike my son? The crowd had grown silent, everyone listening to every word. He was being disrespectful, he's 12 years old. James's composure finally cracked. He's a child. And even if he wasn't, even if he was disrespectful, which I seriously doubt, you do not have the right to strike anyone in your custody. You do not have the right to brutalize a child for asking questions. Brennan's face had gone from pale to red. With all due respect, Chief, I've been on this force for 22 years, and in 22 years, you never learned how to treat people with basic human dignity? James shook his head. Your badge and gun are not weapons to wield against children, Officer Brennan. They're tools to protect and serve the community. Every person in it. He turned to address the crowd. Did anyone see what happened here today? At least 15 hands went up. Is anyone willing to give a statement? I am, said the black woman who'd spoken up earlier. I watched the whole thing. I have video too. So do I, said a teenage boy. Me too, said another person, and another, and another. James looked back at Brennan. Officer Brennan, you are suspended effective immediately. You will surrender your weapon and badge to me right now, and you will report to Internal Affairs first thing Monday morning. There will be a full investigation into this incident. Brennan's jaw clenched. You can't do this. The union will have its say during the investigation. But right now, I watched you assault a child, my child, and I have multiple witnesses and video evidence. You're lucky I'm following protocol instead of arresting you on the spot. James held out his hand. Badge and weapon. Now. For a moment, it looked like Brennan might refuse. Then, slowly, he unclipped his badge and holstered weapon and handed them over. This isn't over, Brennan muttered. You're right, James agreed. It's not. Not by a long shot. As Brennan walked away to his car, another patrol officer arrived, a young black woman named Officer Martinez who James had met during his first week. Chief, I got the call about an incident, she said, then saw Marcus on the bench and her expression softened. Is that your son? Yes. Officer Martinez, I need you to take statements from all these witnesses. Get their contact information. Collect any video evidence they're willing to share. Yes, sir. James sat down beside Marcus, who was still shaking slightly. Angela arrived minutes later, having driven from their home in a panic. She ran to Marcus and enveloped him in a hug, checking his face, his arms, making sure he was truly okay. Baby, are you hurt anywhere else? No, Mom. Just my face. Angela looked at James, her eyes fierce with anger and pain. How could this happen? He's just a child. I know. James put his arm around both of them. I know. And I promise you, this is going to be handled properly. Over the next hour, Officer Martinez took statements from 17 witnesses. Each one corroborated the same story. Marcus had been sitting peacefully on a bench, Brennan had approached him aggressively without cause, and Brennan had struck the boy when he asked questions. The videos were even more damning. Clear footage from multiple angles showing Brennan slapping Marcus, grabbing him, and dragging him toward the patrol car while the boy cried and protested his innocence. James drove Marcus and Angela home in silence. When they got to the house, Angela immediately got ice for Marcus's face while James sat his son down at the kitchen table. Dad, Marcus said quietly, was it because I'm black? The question cut James to his core. He'd known this conversation would come someday, he'd had it with his own father decades ago, but he'd hoped to delay it a few more years. He'd hoped his son could have just a little more innocence, a little more time before the world taught him that particular lesson. I think so, son, James answered honestly. I can't know for sure what was in Officer Brennan's heart, but I know the statistics. I know the patterns. And I know that what happened to you happens to too many young black men and boys in this country. But you're a cop, Marcus said. You're the police chief now. Does that mean it won't happen again? It means I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't. Not to you, not to anyone. James took his son's hand. Marcus, what happened today was wrong. It was illegal. It was immoral. And it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me? Marcus nodded, tears welling up again. You were polite. You were respectful. You asked questions, which is your right. And you were hurt anyway. That's not because of anything you did. That's because Officer Brennan made terrible choices. That's because there are still people in positions of power who abuse that power. And that's what I'm going to change. Angela sat down beside them, still holding the ice pack. Baby, your father and I have always taught you to respect authority, to cooperate with police. But we've also taught you to know your rights. You have the right to ask why you're being stopped. You have the right to be treated with dignity. And you have the right to expect that the people sworn to protect you will actually do that. What's going to happen to that officer? Marcus asked. There's going to be an investigation, James explained. He's been suspended. If the investigation confirms what we all saw, and I have no doubt it will, he'll face disciplinary action. He might lose his job. He might face criminal charges. Good, Marcus said quietly. Then he looked up at his father. Dad, does this happen a lot? To other kids? James exchanged a look with Angela. Yes, son. More than it should. Then you have to fix it. Not just for me. For everyone. Monday morning, James walked into the police station with a sense of purpose he'd never felt before. The incident with Marcus had been personal, but it had also crystallized something in his mind, why he'd wanted this job in the first place. He called a meeting of all senior officers and department heads. The conference room was packed. By now, most of you have heard about what happened to my son on Saturday, James began. Some of you have seen the videos. They're all over social media, and they're being picked up by news outlets. This is a crisis, not just for this department, but for the community's trust in us. He paused, looking at each face in the room. But this isn't just about one bad incident with one bad officer. This is about a culture. This is about systemic problems that have been allowed to fester for too long. Officer Brennan has been on this force for 22 years. 22 years. How many other Marcus Thompsons has he harassed? How many other parents have had to comfort their children after encounters with him? And why was he allowed to continue? The room was silent. Effective immediately, we're implementing new training protocols. Every officer in this department will undergo bias training, de-escalation training, and community engagement training. We're establishing a civilian review board to investigate complaints against officers. We're requiring body cameras for all officers, no exceptions. And we're creating a database of complaints and incidents that will follow officers throughout their careers. One of the older lieutenants, a white man named Patterson, raised his hand. Chief, with respect, the union is going to fight a lot of this. Let them, James replied. I'm happy to negotiate on procedure and implementation. But I'm not negotiating on the principle. We serve the community. All of the community. And if there are officers who can't or won't do that with integrity and respect, they don't belong here. The internal affairs investigation into Officer Brennan moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming: 17 witness statements, multiple videos from different angles, and Brennan's own dash cam footage that contradicted his report. Brennan claimed he'd approached Marcus because he matched the description of a suspect in recent car break-ins. But the description was for a black male in his 20s, over 6 feet tall, wearing a red hoodie. Marcus was 12, 5'3", and wearing a blue t-shirt. The description didn't match in any way. Brennan claimed Marcus had been belligerent and threatening. The videos showed a scared child asking questions and trying to understand why he was being stopped. Brennan claimed he'd only restrained Marcus with minimal force. The videos showed a clear, open-handed slap across the face, followed by rough handling that left bruises on Marcus's arm. 3 weeks after the incident, the findings came down. Officer Brennan was terminated for excessive use of force, violation of department policy, filing a false report, and conduct unbecoming an officer. The department also recommended criminal charges for assault and battery. The district attorney's office agreed. Brennan was arrested and charged with assault and battery on a minor. He would face trial in 6 months. The incident with Marcus became a flashpoint in the community. Protests were organized, town halls were held, and media outlets descended on the small city to cover the story. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the usual pattern of police department defensiveness and community anger, there was dialogue. James held weekly community meetings, listening to stories from residents who'd had negative encounters with police. He invited community leaders to participate in the reform process. He made the department's use of force data public and committed to radical transparency. Not everyone was happy. Some officers felt betrayed, accused James of throwing Brennan under the bus to advance his own career. A few resigned in protest. The police union challenged several of his reforms, leading to lengthy negotiations, but slowly, things began to change. Young officers who'd joined the force wanting to make a difference felt empowered to speak up about problems they'd witnessed. Community members who'd been afraid to file complaints came forward. The Civilian Review Board began investigating dozens of old cases that had been swept under the rug. And Marcus? He went back to school, back to basketball, back to being a kid. But he was different now, older somehow, more aware of the world's injustices, but also more determined to be part of the solution. He joined a youth activism group. He spoke at one of his father's town halls, telling his story and advocating for change. He wrote an essay about his experience that was published in the local newspaper. I was scared that day, he wrote. I was humiliated and hurt. But I'm also lucky that my dad has the power to do something about what happened. Lucky that people believed me and stood up for me. Most kids don't have that. Most families don't have that power. So we have to use our voice not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's still waiting for justice. Officer Brennan's trial lasted 2 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: the videos, the witness testimony, medical records of Marcus's injuries, and expert testimony about proper police procedure. Brennan's defense argued that he'd made a mistake in judgment but hadn't intended to harm Marcus. They painted him as a dedicated officer with a long career who'd had one bad day. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found him guilty on all counts. Brennan was sentenced to 1 year in jail, 3 years of probation, and was permanently barred from working in law enforcement. He was also ordered to pay restitution to the Thompson family and to attend anger management and bias training. James sat in the courtroom gallery with Angela and Marcus, watching as the sentence was read. He felt no joy in it, just a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. Brennan's career was over, but more importantly, a message had been sent. In this city, in this department, officers who abused their power would face consequences. A year after the incident at Riverside Park, James stood on a stage in the city auditorium, addressing a packed crowd at the annual Community Police Partnership Awards ceremony. When I became chief of police 18 months ago, he said, I thought I understood the challenges facing our department and our community. I'd been a cop for 25 years. I'd worked these streets. I thought I knew what we needed to fix. He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd: police officers, community activists, city council members, religious leaders, teachers, and families. But it took something personal, something painful, to truly open my eyes. When my son was hurt by one of my own officers, I realized that the problem wasn't just about bad apples or isolated incidents. It was about a system that allowed those incidents to happen. It was about a culture that protected the powerful and dismissed the powerless. It was about the gap between what we claim to be as a police department, protectors and servants, and what we sometimes actually are. In the front row, Marcus sat between his parents, no longer the scared 12-year-old from that day in the park. He was 13 now, taller, more confident, but still carrying the weight of what he'd experienced. "We've made progress," James continued. "Use of force incidents are down 40%. Community complaints are down 30%. Officer safety is up. And most importantly, the surveys show that community trust in this department has increased for the first time in a decade." The crowd applauded. But we're not done. We can't be done. Because somewhere in this city, there's another 12-year-old just trying to live their life, and they deserve to know that if they encounter a police officer, they'll be treated with dignity and respect. They deserve to know that the badge represents protection, not threat. They deserve to feel safe. After the ceremony, families and officers mingled over refreshments. A young black woman in a police uniform approached Marcus. "Hey," she said, smiling. "I'm Officer Jasmine Martinez. I'm the one who took all those statements the day, well, you know." Marcus nodded. "I remember. I just wanted to tell you that you're kind of a hero around the station. The younger officers, especially the officers of color, we all know that what happened to you was wrong, and we're grateful that your dad is changing things." "I'm not a hero," Marcus said quietly. "I was just a kid who got hurt." "That's exactly what makes it so important," Martinez replied. "You didn't choose this. It happened to you. But you and your family chose to make sure it meant something. You chose to fight for change." Marcus smiled a little. "My dad's the one really fighting. You're fighting too. Every time you tell your story, every time you show up to these events, every time you keep living your life and not letting fear win, that's fighting." 3 years after that day in Riverside Park, Marcus Thompson was 15 years old, a sophomore in high school, and the starting point guard on his varsity basketball team. He was also a youth advisor to the city's Civilian Police Review Board. Officer Brennan had served his jail time and had disappeared from public life. Some said he'd moved to another state. Marcus didn't think about him much anymore. James Thompson had been re-elected as police chief, the city council voting unanimously to extend his term. The department had become a model for progressive policing reforms, with other cities sending delegations to study their programs. The changes hadn't been easy. There had been resistance, setbacks, and moments when it felt like the old ways would never truly change. But slowly, steadily, the culture was shifting. New officers joined the force who'd been attracted by the reforms, by the emphasis on community service and accountability. Veteran officers who'd resisted at first began to see the benefits: better relationships with the community, less tension on the streets, more cooperation from residents. On a Saturday afternoon in June, almost exactly 3 years after the incident, Marcus was back at Riverside Park, playing pickup basketball with his friends. A police officer walked past the courts, a young Latino man named Officer Reyes. He waved at the kids. "Hey, Marcus. Good game." Marcus waved back, smiling. One of his friends, a white kid named Josh, said, "Dude, it's so weird that you're like friends with cops now." Marcus dribbled the ball, considering. They're not all bad. They never were. But the system was broken, and some people abused it. My dad's trying to fix that. It's not perfect yet, but it's better. Does it still freak you out? Seeing cops? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. I still get a little nervous when I see a patrol car. I probably always will. What happened to me, that doesn't just go away. But I also know that because of what happened, other kids might not have to be scared. That helps. He took a shot, and the ball swished through the net. Later that evening, the Thompson family sat around the dinner table, a rare night when James wasn't working late or attending a community meeting. Angela had made Marcus's favorite meal: fried chicken, mac and cheese, and collard greens. "How was your day, baby?" Angela asked Marcus. "Good. Played ball at Riverside. Shot around with the guys." James looked up from his plate, a flicker of concern crossing his face. Marcus knew what he was thinking. "It's okay, Dad. I'm okay. I'm not going to let what happened keep me from living my life." James reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "I'm proud of you. You know that, right? Not just for surviving what happened, but for how you've handled it. For using your voice. For not becoming bitter. I learned from the best, Marcus said, looking at both his parents. We all learned, Angela said softly. That day changed all of us. It was the worst day of my life, watching what happened to my baby. But it also showed me how strong we are as a family. How strong our community can be when we stand together. James nodded. Change is slow. Sometimes it feels impossibly slow. But it happens. It's happening. And 3 years ago, when I pulled up to that park and saw my son in the back of that patrol car, I made a promise, not just to Marcus, but to every parent, every child, every person in this city. I promised that I would do everything in my power to make sure our police department serves everyone with dignity and justice. I'm still keeping that promise. We know, Dad, Marcus said. The whole city knows. Later that night, Marcus sat at his desk doing homework. His phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, his best friend, the one he'd been waiting for that day 3 years ago, before everything changed. Tyler, yo, reminder that tomorrow's our anniversary. LOL. Marcus, anniversary, Tyler. Tomorrow's 3 years since I stood you up at the park. Sorry again, bro. Worst timing ever, Marcus smiled. He'd never blamed Tyler for being late that day. If Tyler had been there, maybe things would have happened differently. Or maybe they would have happened the same way, and Tyler would have been traumatized too. Marcus, all good, bro. You've made up for it. LOL. Tyler, for real though, you changed the whole city. That's wild of Marcus. Nah, my dad changed the city. I just got hit. Tyler, you did more than that. You stayed strong. You spoke up. You didn't let them make you disappear. That matters. Marcus stared at the text for a long moment. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe just refusing to be silenced, refusing to accept injustice, refusing to let fear win, maybe that was its own kind of heroism. He looked at the small scar on his cheek, barely visible now unless you knew to look for it. It was a reminder, not of victimhood, but of survival. Of standing up. Of fighting back, not with violence, but with truth. His father had taught him that justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about building systems that prevented harm in the first place. It was about creating a world where a 12-year-old kid could sit on a bench at a park without fear. They weren't there yet. Maybe they never would be completely. But they were closer. And that had to count for something. Marcus picked up his phone and typed one more message to Tyler. Marcus, thanks bro. See you tomorrow. Then he went back to his homework, just another teenager trying to figure out algebra, thinking about the basketball game next week, wondering if that girl from English class liked him back, normal kid stuff. Because despite everything, despite the trauma and the pain and the fight for justice, he was still just Marcus Thompson, a kid who liked basketball, a kid who deserved to be safe, a kid who'd helped change his city, not by being perfect or powerful, but simply by being brave enough to tell the truth.